Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built and welcome back to another episode on the 996 IMS replacement. So as you can probably tell by looking at me, there's been no time at all since I finished the previous episode on the gearbox and clutch removal of the 996. Now that's out, we need to actually start looking at replacing the IMS and the RMS. So, okay, so let's get back in there, and the first thing you need to do is clean up that disgusting mess in there. Alright, that is looking a lot cleaner. I'm not really, I'm filthy, but this is much nicer and tidier. What I need to do now, I'm going to drop the oil. Even though I replaced the oil only about 1,000 k's ago, I'm not doing the filter and everything else. I'm just dropping the oil because I just need to get, when I pull the rear main seal and the IMS bearing out, I don't want any oil in there to mess things up. So let's get that out now, and then we can start looking at what we need to do to get these seals replaced and bearings. Alright, so the next job we need to tackle before we can actually remove the IMS bearing is we need to actually lock the engine and lock the cams. This is a vitally important part because of where the bearing is. If it gets loose, you can actually loosen one of the chains. They could skip a tooth and then the timing will be out. You can get valves hitting pistons and catastrophic engine failure, which is what we're trying to avoid. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is remove this air filter box and everything, so we can get down to the harmonic balancer on the end of the engine, and I'll show you then how we lock it into place. Okay, so the air box is out of the way, and I've got my 24mm socket on the end of the bolt in there, and I'm turning it around to try and get this particular hole. We're looking for the hole with a teardrop shape. As you can see, that's got a teardrop shape as opposed to the round holes the other ones are. And I want to get that hole up to around this area about here, and where it gets to there, we want to stick an 8mm drill bit. Will do the job. Stick it through the hole, and it will line up with another hole in the case, and that will lock the engine at top dead center. So you want to sort of work your way around and find that and lock it into top dead center. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, and the drill bit is in. I did have to cut it down slightly, just an old drill bit, but 8mm drill bit does the job. It's locked in now. That is all the way in, nice and tight, and that engine is not going anywhere. So that is part one done. Okay, so the next job is we have to actually lock the cams into place. So as you can see, I'm back up under the car here, and this is actually on the right side bank, and that is the top cam, and down, actually just down under here is the bottom cam. So what we need to do is we need to undo these, take these plugs out. So you might be able to see there inside that. Now I've got the cap out. That there is no slot in the end of that cam. That is because this is an early engine, and the Series 1 engines, I believe, are a 5-chain engine. Okay, so from what I gather, the early engines, and this is just a good way to confirm, is when you take off the top cam plug, you'll see that this is actually, this one, you don't need to lock the top cam because there's no slot in the end of the cam. That is, with these early engines, are a 5-chain engine, so basically they've got a chain that goes around the IMS bearing, up around the crank. That's one chain, and then they've got another chain that goes over from the IMS to the lower cam on both sides. So you've got, there's 1, 2, 3, and then you've got another chain that goes from the lower cam to the upper cam on either side, so that's 4 and 5. On the Series 2 engines, I believe there are 3-chain engines, so they've got the chain here in the middle still, and then they've just got one big chain that goes around both cams and back to the IMS and over the other side as well. That in those cases you need to lock the top and bottom cams. In this case, because we don't, we've got the early engine, and that's just confirmed that we just need to lock the lower cams. So here in this, you can actually see the slot in the top of the cam. There's one at the bottom as well. It's hard to get a good camera angle, but you can see the slot there. So that means that one needs to be locked, and for that we're going to have to make up a tool. But you can see just above the cam there is an earth strap, so first of all we need to remove that. Okay, so now I've come over to the back of the engine, and these are the caps for the left bank of cams. So basically diagonally opposite the other ones through the engine, and this is on the back right next to the exhaust. So I'm going to reach up in here and take these caps out as well, and then we can start making a tool to lock them up. Alright, so with a bit of cardboard aid design, I've made up my template for the tools that I need to lock this. You can get these tools from Porsche, but you can make it. It's not that difficult. Basically, this is the shape you need. This tooth section here locks into the cam, and then you just need a notch in it to get around the sort of the mounting flange. And that little dot there, I actually used, one of the viewers sent me this the other day, and these are fantastic. These long pens, it's the first time I've got to use it, and I could hold this piece up into place and poke this through the mounting hole and draw my little dot, and that is where I need to drill my hole. So it's going to be really easy to make these this work, and this tool is the same for front and back. So let's go and start making this into a steel piece that will actually do the job. Alright, so I made a couple of these tools now. I ended up, I didn't like them the first time because this is about 3mm plate, and it was a little bit narrow. There was a little bit too much slop when it sat into the groove. I wasn't happy with it, but because I cut it, if you might have seen, out of a bit of angle, there was sort of a thicker portion where I cut through the angle, so I flipped them around and cut them out again, so it looks like an S now. Instead of just having one notch, it's got sort of two. But the thicker piece is going to sit better and hold the cam a bit better. So I've made these now. Now it's time to bolt them in and lock the cams into place. Okay, so here you can see I've installed my cam lock. It's fitting in nicely. It bolts into just up above here. It's hard to get the camera in here, but this is where the this earth strap was. I have reused the bolt for the earth strap on this side, but on the other side you can actually use one of the pressure plate bolts off the clutch. They're the same size to hold this in. So both cam locks are now secure. So in theory, the engine is now completely locked into place, and fingers crossed, I can actually start removing some of the tension off the chains. Okay, so now the engine is completely locked into place, and now it starts getting into the slightly scary bit is I now need to trust my locks, and I need to start removing some chain tensioners. Basically, there's 3 chain tensioners you need to remove. As I said, there's multiple chains. I don't have to worry about the chains that are actually holding the cams together, but I need to take the tension off of the other chains because they're all linked onto the IMS bearing, and you need that free so you can pull the bearing out. One of them is sort of goes vertically just here. There's another one that's sort of horizontally just in this side here, and then there's a last one which is also vertical, but it's a bit more of a pain because it goes from the top over in the engine bay, and it's actually underneath the air conditioning compressor. So let's start removing these ones that I can get to, and then let's go and see if we can tackle the other one. Next thing we need to do is we need to remove the belt so we can remove the air conditioning compressor, because the actual tensioner is right down under here, so you can't get to it with that in the way. Removing this belt is super easy. I just need to sort of yank on the tensioner with a 24mm socket in that direction, and it loosens it all up and take the belt off. But I can't do it with one hand, kept filming, and I'm currently on top of a ladder doing this because I can't lower the car. So I'm going to put you down, and let's come back when the belt is off. Belt's off, and just a note, I marked on the edge of the belt that was closest to me, so I know that when I put the belt back on, it goes back on the same way. I'm not actually taking it fully out of the engine bay at the moment. It's sort of stuck under one of those lower pulleys, and I don't need it out of the way. I'm just going to undo these bolts now on the compressor, and hopefully I can get enough movement to get that out of the way to be able to get that tensioner. That was an epic pain in the backside trying to get this air conditioning compressor out. It's now out of the way. Basically there's 2 bolts on the front and there's one on the back that sits. It's quite difficult to get to, and to pull it out you have to sort of hold it up out of the way. It does say that you need to take this, drain the hydraulic oil and remove this reservoir, but you can actually get it out without doing that. It's just a matter of holding with a magnet, holding this rear bolt up. You can't actually take it all the way out, at least while it's in the car. You need to hold it up out of the way with a magnet and then wrestle it out. But finally I can get down deep down in here, and I can't actually see it from this angle, but there it is over the back there. You can just see the edges of that nut down the bottom there. That is the last tensioner. Yay! Alright, this is the moment of truth. This is the this is the scary bit where I actually have to remove the old IMS bearing. So it's actually under this cover plate here. First thing I'm going to do is to undo this locking screw in the center of it, and then undo the bolts and pull the cover off, and let's see what's underneath. Alright, so here's the first look at the bearing, and overall at the moment it seems to be in pretty good shape. Yeah, I'm not upset with how that looks, so let's I'm just going to keep keeping everything clean here. But to remove the bearing, you can get a proper toolkit to remove the bearing. I'm not going to use that. I am actually, you can get something to grab a hold of this center bolt and sort of that screws onto there and then draws the bearing out. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use a bearing puller. So I am going to pop the this bolt back through the back of the and into the intermediate shaft, which is actually a hollow tube anyway. So I'm going to knock that backwards into the shaft, and then get my bearing puller and pull the bearing out. Alright, there's lots of disgusting sludgy oil in there, which I believe is pretty much in every case. There's always sludgy oil. It's not actually supposed to be in there. It's not actually supposed to be open to the oil, but the oil just always sort of leaks in there. So as I told you, I'm using a bearing puller, and this is the bearing puller. It's something I ordered from Super Cheap. As you can see, it's got these 3 teeth, and when you tighten it down, this little spike sort of comes in and it pushes the teeth apart. So these the teeth lock in behind the bearing, and that grabs hold of it. And then you've got the other part of it that you tighten down, and that will then grab hold of the bearing and pull the bearing out of the case. Let's see if we can get this thing out. Okay, so it's been quite frustrating trying to get this bearing out this morning. Basically, what's been the issue is this is the puller, and the teeth I think are actually, I'm tightening it out as much as I can, but the teeth are sort of are bending and not grabbing on and pulling through the middle of the bearing. There's just not enough tooth on the end of it to actually grab. I tried sort of grinding back because I didn't think, because it's quite a deep bearing, so I thought that was the issue first, so I ground back the here, but I think it's made this top section probably a little bit more flexible, and it bends when I get any pressure on it. What I'm going to try now, I'm sort of getting I'm starting to run out of ideas. I'm going to get the welder out and try and weld a bigger tab onto the end of these teeth on all 3 of them, so that I can, hopefully it grabs around the edge of the bearing further and it can't slip off, because what it's doing is it grabs out inside the bearing, and as it's pulling down, it's sliding off of the bearing and sliding inside. So let's try getting out the welder and see if I can get it to work. Alright, so I've welded on these teeth. They're much bigger now. They're quite ugly, but that's not really a concern. It's more just whether they're going to fit through the center of the bearing and whether they're going to hang on. So let's give it a try. Hopefully this works. Well, we ended up snapping the ends clean off. This is the piece that came off. It snapped straight off the end, so that's not working. I really don't know what I'm going to do to get this thing out. Driving me crazy. On a side note, the bearing looks to be in perfect condition. It's nice and solid, nice and tight. There's no issues with it. At worst, I can put it back together again, but I don't particularly want to do that. I'm here now. I've spent a crazy amount of money on a bearing. I need to get this thing out. All right, so I just raced down to Super Cheap and picked myself up a bearing puller set. Now, this is a blind bearing puller, and the actual picture on it actually looks like it may actually be the IMS bearing on 911. So let's hope this one works. This one's actually a slide hammer version. So the bearing that I've got in this car, because it's a dual row, it actually has a ring halfway along it that clips in as it goes into its seat. So I'm hoping the slide hammer version will actually be able to sort of knock it out of that, and that might be sort of an extra thing that's holding it there. So let's see how it goes. Alright, I don't like that slide hammer at all. It didn't seem to budge it, and also I'm realising that I'm putting stresses on the other end of the IMS shaft. I'm moving the whole thing. Like, I could potentially do some damage down the other end, which I hope I haven't done. Fingers crossed, I really hope I haven't done anything. Well, I know this is not going to be a popular choice, but I can't have the car off the road for a month at a time because this is my daily driver. The bearing is in perfect shape. It is really nice and tight. It's there's absolutely no play in it. I can feel there's still grease all through it. It's not like it's loose and full of oil. It's quite stiff to turn, as in not too stiff, but similar to the new bearing I've got. So I'm quite happy that the bearing is completely fine. There is nothing wrong with it, and I am going to close it back up again, and I'll monitor it, and if it becomes an issue further down the track, I will replace it then. I have the bearing here. I can replace it now in a day, probably. It's a lot of work to pull this apart again, and I don't really want to get to this stage, but if I need to do it, then I'll get the repair kit or borrow one from somewhere or something to be able to get to be able to pull this bearing, because pulling the bearing is just, it's, as you've seen, it's just proved to be a real mission. So I'm going to clean this all up and seal it up again. Alright, I'm still going to be using new micro-encapsulated nuts to bolt this back on. These have basically got a seal on them so that they should seal perfectly. You need to get these things. So doing these up to 10 Newton meters and sealing it back up again. Alright, and that is where we are going to leave this episode. Yes, I did get all the way down there and didn't get to replace the IMS bearing, but I have actually been offered, some people already offered me to lend me the right tools. So in a couple of months when I'm ready to go, I will get back in there and replace the bearing. But I'm quite comfortable at the moment, and because I'm going on about a 4,000 kilometre road trip in about a week, I need this car on the road. I can't leave it off the road and wait, and I need it as my daily driver. So I am comfortable with that. I also want to give a shout out to Burner's Cars. I found his videos that he did on his Boxster doing the IMS bearing were really good. It's a really good series he's done, and they were quite helpful. So definitely worth a look if you're looking for some more info on this. hang around for the next episode, which will be coming out soon, which is going through and replacing the rear main seal and the clutch. So I've still got that to do. But all right, as always, if you enjoy the videos, please subscribe and hit the like button. That helps. If you want to watch the videos a day early, you can hit us up on Patron, and it really helps us out. So all right, until next time, see you guys.